Good afternoon, everyone. Paul Kitty, once again, great selection with that music. Feeling the summer vibes. 81 degrees, June 3rd. It's a great day. I am Luke Tannen. I'm Executive Director of Chicago Innovation, and I want to welcome you all to Innovating Towards Sustainability. Now, we're now in our 20th year at Chicago Innovation, and I am joined right now by the person who started it all, Tom Kuzmarski.
Thanks, Luke. Hey, welcome, everyone. It's so great to have you with us. And I just can't tell you how excited I am for the summer and Chicago reopening up again. It's just fantastic. Today's topic is such an important one, and it's one that we need everyone to really care about: sustainability.
Could not agree more, Tom. You know, the call to build a brighter, safer, and more sustainable future is a very important call to make, especially to our innovators who are most adept at solving the world's biggest challenges.
And in taking big steps as well as little steps, we can all take steps to make a huge difference. And what's most important is for us to understand that we really can make changes that will impact our businesses, our customers, and our planet in a sustainable way.
And before we hear from our speakers, there are a couple housekeeping items I just wanted to share. First, if you in the audience have a question for the panel, please send us your question via the Zoom Q&A, and we'll plan to spend the last 10 or 15 minutes or so addressing everyone's questions. And also keep an eye out for a couple polling questions during the discussion so we can hear from you, the audience. Now, I'd like to thank our year-round sponsors who make everything possible at Chicago Innovation, and that starts with our diamond sponsors, SMS Assist, Walgreens, Accenture, and Wintrust. Gold sponsors, Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor, Vetter Price. Bronze sponsors, Energy BBDO, Crown Castle, LK, and we're joined by the CEO of LK today, and also we're joined by Accenture, one of our diamond sponsors, Ramsey Innovations, Thompson Coburn, Groupon, and Aero Digital Labs. And our media partners, Intersection, Clear Channel, WBBM News Radio, and NBC Chicago.
Our speakers today truly understand the responsibility that innovators have in leading us towards a sustainable future. And leading today's discussion is our good friend, our great friend, Nancy Rushinsky. And Nancy is the Chief Operating Officer for the Zeno Group, a global communications agency, and the 2021 Agency of the Year, according to PR Week magazine. That's great, Nancy. Nancy has had over 30 years of strategic communications and innovation experience, works with a wide range of clients from Hyatt and Coca-Cola and Lenovo and Pizza Hut and LK, and is on the Chicago Innovation Board, and our great friend. Please welcome Nancy Rushinsky.
Thank you so much, Tom and Luke. Great to see everybody today. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. It's quite a roster, so I'm going to get right to it. First, we have joining us Luke Saunders, who is the CEO of Farmer's Fridge. As many of you know, Farmer's Fridge is the fast-growing fresh food vending machine company now operating in 17 states, started right here in Chicago. They were named among Time Magazine's Best Inventions of 2019, and they are a past Chicago Innovation Award winner. Welcome, Luke. Next up, Ilsa Melngailis. Ilsa is the Senior Director of Global Partnerships and the Business Council for the United Nations. We are so privileged to have Ilsa with us today. We don't have a speaker from the United Nations every day in our group, so it's an honor to have you with us, looking to learn from you today. As many of you know, the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals have been adopted by 193 countries now. I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go through our discussion, but those Sustainable Development Goals provide a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people in the planet. So important work. I'd also like to welcome Rick Phillips, who's the President and CEO of LK. Welcome, Rick. LK is 100-year-old, you may not know you know this company, but you do. They're a 100-year-old global leader in innovative water delivery products, including the iconic Easy H2O bottle filling station, which I'm sure everyone on this call has used at some point. They're also America's #1 seller of kitchen sinks. LK is also a past Chicago Innovation Award winner. And then finally, Brenda Cucci. Brenda is the managing director for Accenture. She oversees Accenture's local work with clients and ecosystem partners, transforming the global economy into a more sustainable marketplace. Big job. We're looking forward to learning from you and hearing more about what you and the folks at Accenture do today, Brenda. So welcome all. Thank you very much. As we often do on our webinars for Chicago Innovation, we do like to kick things off by getting the entire audience who's watching to get involved in the topic that we're covering today. So Paul, with your help, I would love to put our first poll up just to ground everyone in the topic. And we'll ask everybody who's watching at home to quickly answer the question. Just click on it and give us your answer. The question is, does your company have a formalized program around sustainability? You might call it an environmental citizenship program or something else, but we'd love to know if yes, you have a formalized program, you don't have a formalized program, but you have informal initiatives, or no, you don't have any sustainability programs or initiatives at your company. And I'm going to fill it in also. And then we will quickly gather the responses and perhaps we'll ask our panelists to comment on it. So while you're responding, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and get our panelists talking. So let's start with, let's sort of just start things easy here. And just, I'm going to ask each of you to take just a minute and share with everybody what you're doing right now in terms of sustainability and innovation. Just give us a little sense of what your focus is in right now and why this topic is meaningful to you. Let's start with Rick.
Sure, Nancy, absolutely. Well, at LK, we're fortunate to really have a very natural linkage between innovation and sustainability as we run our business every day. As you mentioned, the bottle filling units and the water coolers that we have and the flavored water dispensers that we manufacture, all of these things help to eliminate plastic bottles from the environment and really help to, I think, sustain a culture that is very aware and focused on this issue. So I guess the first thing is that it's at the core of our business and what we do every day. The second thing is I think we really do, as I said, have a culture and mindset around this. You know, our younger generation of people really push us on this in a really positive way. And so we're involved in many projects and events and organizations. We encourage a lot of education of our employees around sustainability. So those are the couple things that that we use to really formalize how we try to address this really important topic.
Perfect. And we will talk about that younger generation, I'm sure, in this discussion. Brenda, can you talk to us about sustainability and innovation and your role and focus?
Absolutely. So I have recently taken on the role of the Midwest go-to-market lead for responsible business and sustainability services. And for those of you on the call that know who Accenture is and what we do, you know, our job is to work with our clients to provide them services and products that help them obtain their business goals. And given the large market pressures that all of our clients are facing right now, whether they're governmental or financial or consumer or employees, they have a lot of things that they're working on to accomplish in the sustainability space. And so we are helping them do exactly that. So it's a super exciting space, and we have all kinds of ideas and things that we're working with our clients on right now.
Perfect. Ilsa, can you share with us a little bit about your focus and your role?
Great. Yes. Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. And I'm honored to be here, also because I'm the only non-Chicago person on the call. So there was a lot of story trading before the call started, and I thought, oh, geez, I don't know if they know I live in New York City. Anyway, but that's where the UN is, and we live and breathe sustainability, especially since the Sustainable Development Goals were launched in 2015. And my role in particular, and the UN foundations, among other things, is to engage the UN Foundation engages Americans with the UN and on sustainability and the SDGs. The SDGs are the goals for short, SDGs. And I in particular work on engaging business with the Sustainable Development Goals and with the UN. And I do that because I'm personally very passionate about the role of business in driving change. And also the UN is very much more open for business than it has been in years past. And then innovation in particular is also regarded as pivotal to achieving the SDGs. We're not going to solve the problems that the world has without significant innovation, but as well as scale, which I hope we'll talk a little bit more about during the conversation. But there's a lot of innovation happening inside the UN, and then there's a lot of innovation happening by companies that are collaborating with the UN. And then there's a lot of innovation around collective action, which maybe we can talk about as well. But thank you for having me.
For sure. Thank you. And Luke, why don't you round things out? Tell us a little bit about what you're focused on these days and how sustainability and innovation fit in.
Yeah, sure. So, with Farmer's Fridge, the idea was to build sustainability into the core of the business. So, naturally using lots of fruits and vegetables versus a ton of like protein products and things like that. We're kind of out of the gate, more sustainable based on the supply chain. And then we have a number of initiatives that we've tried to build into the business, whether it's sustainable sourcing practices for the ingredients or the jar returns at the fridges. And so just trying to make sure that sustainability stays at the center of everything that we do. But the whole idea for Farmer's Fridge was to rebuild the supply chain to make fresh, healthy food more accessible. And then by definition, you'd actually be creating a more sustainable demand for products that go in, like the things that go into those products. So very similar to the LK approach, where just like it's ingrained in what we do.
Fantastic. Thanks, Luke. Okay, great start. Before we jump into our next question, Paul, did we want to share results of the poll? Okay, well, that's, I think at first blush, encouraging. So more than half of you have a formalized program. Just under a quarter still have some informal initiatives. So about 3/4 have formal or informal, and then still 20% don't have any sustainability programs or initiatives. Brenda, I'll just ask you, because you work with your consulting clients on this space. Does that split surprise you, or is that pretty typical of what you find among your clients?
I think it's higher than I thought it was going to be. It really is. I know that from a business perspective, because our clients are being pressured to report on their ESG scorings. But for the employees to say that they're actually part of a sustainability program, that's really encouraging. That makes me smile, but I am very surprised.
Me too. I think that's starting us off on an optimistic note.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Ilsa, I'm going to start with you. There's sustainable development is often described as, quote, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. I would love for you to sort of expand a little bit on that notion. Is that a good way to sort of a good shorthand for us to use as we think about sustainable development? And then talk a little bit more of your view. You touched on this a minute ago, but sort of where innovation, the role of innovation in sort of helping us achieve that balance.
Great. Yeah, and I'll try and keep it short. I'd love to hear from our colleagues. Well, I think that phrase does encapsulate what sustainability means, and I think we're seeing it. I mean, if you look at the transformation that's happening around climate, and the transformation that we're starting to see around food systems, getting to what Luke was talking about. So there's a big UN Food Systems Summit this fall. So there's a focus on transforming food systems. The big challenge is what's embodied in that quote. So how do you meet the needs of the present? And I'd say not without compromising the ability of future generations, but but in order to enhance the ability of future generations to do the same. And I think that one of the challenges for those of us working in this space is how to communicate and motivate all stakeholders to take part in this, and to not feel like it's a sacrifice, to not feel like it's a zero-sum game. So, for example, when the Sustainable Development Goals were launched in 2015, there was a group called the Business and Sustainable Development Commission that we helped stand up, but it was over 20 CEOs from around the world who, along with a few countries, supported a massive ROI analysis that looked at or found, I should say, $12 trillion economic prize that would that would be shared among companies that embrace sustainability and the sustainable development goals, whether it be in energy, global health, infrastructure, and food systems, actually, were the areas that they looked at. So I think it's behooves all of us who work in this space to not only do the work, but then also communicate that it's to everybody's benefit, that it can be done in a way that doesn't mean significant short-term losses in order to provide for the future. I will just leave with end with a thought that I hope we touch on later, which is the role of the investor community in helping to give companies the space, the breathing space they need to make some of these changes. That might mean, less profitability in the short term, for example, as they transition away from plastics or whatever it might be, or really clean up their supply chain. We need to give companies the breathing space to do that and reward them for those efforts. And I think that until the markets also embrace this, and we're seeing it, of course, but until it's kind of holistically truly supported, that's always going to hamper the transition to sustainability and the progress that we need to see.
You said a lot of important things there. And I think one that I would just love to underscore when you set the role of the investment community, it's two things. One is giving the breathing room so that companies can catch up and make the investments needed to do the right things, but also rewarding the company, investing in those companies that are getting it right. So, and I think that's, anyone else want to comment on that, or we can keep going? Brenda?
Yeah, she hit on what, from my vantage point, right? From a corporation that works with our clients to do these type of things, the financial community's pressure to, have less waste and to do things more efficiently, that's a great thing, because it really is now pushing our clients to do the things that can be done to help the bigger picture. And they will be financially rewarded, because those companies that do that are going to be the ones where the investors invest in, right? So it's a beautiful way that this is coming together, because the driving factors are helping the bigger picture, but they're going to make businesses do what they need to do.
Absolutely.
Right? And the government is putting money aside to invest so companies can take those dollars and actually invest in these programs, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. The role of government's important, and I'm sure we'll come back to it. Rick, I'm just going to skip around a little bit here. We talked about the fact that your business at LK is inherently, a sustainable model. A lot of what you're doing is helping to eliminate plastic from the environment. Can you talk a little bit, though, from your vantage point, sort of how do you balance the needs of you're a growing corporation and the business needs of the company with your role as a steward, for smart sustainability and best practices tied to, access to water, distribution of water, and again, eliminating plastic waste? Just talk about, again, you're in a unique position given what your company does, but any sort of lessons that can be helpful for other business leaders in terms of balancing those, the things you need to do to grow the business and the need to do the right thing and the sustainable thing along the way.
Sure. I guess maybe as I think about it at LK, we put it in a couple categories. One is, I think the biggest impact you can have is when you really link good business practices that are sustainable and growing and profitable with sustainability efforts. And so when you innovate new products that not only help the environment, but generate a positive return, they generate additional investment dollars to get behind them, those can be the big winners. So certainly as we think about our product development pipeline, this is a big element of what we look at. Does it fit with sustainability? Does it fit with a positive future for us that we can continue to invest in and bring other partners into? So I think that's one big priority. But then, there's also always smaller everyday things that as individuals and as organizations that we can all do. And so we try to also put those forward. small things like charitable contributions, like connecting employees to organizations that are focused on sustainability, hosting events. Maybe it's a adopt a beach or a river cleanup kind of thing that sort of connects to our business, but also helps our culture and connects people to things that are important to them. And then providing training for our employees. It's an area of interest. As I said, it's an area where some of our members of our younger generations are pushing us in a positive way, as I said. So we try to think about it, I guess, in those two ways. What future innovations will help drive sustainability and good business for LK and our shareholders? And then what kinds of things can we do every day, from recycling in the office to attending an event on the weekend that helps the environment and sustainability in some way?
Terrific. There's so many good suggestions in there. I hope people were taking notes. And I think it's such a good, I'm looking at Luke, I'm going to come to you next, Luke, but such an interesting contrast and such an important reminder that, these ideas don't have to come from a startup. You're a century-old company doing some really forward-looking things when it comes to thinking about the environment in the future. So love that. So before I go to Luke, Paul, did you want to put up because I know we have a poll that has food as part of it, and maybe that's a good thing to do first, and then we can talk to Luke a little bit more about sustainability in the food system. Poll number 2, should we put it up? There it is. Okay. All right. This is a fun one, guys. So hope everybody just go with your first instinct. Don't overthink it. And the question is, if you had $1 million to invest in a sustainability related cause, which would you choose? The choices are food sourcing and distribution, clean water and sanitation, recycling and plastic reduction, affordable clean energy, or other. And you can expand on your answer in the chat. Of course, this is a trick question because they're all really, really important, but pick one and the panelists should pick as well. And we will come back to that. And maybe we'll have you comment on the answer, Luke. So Luke, obviously when sustainability is discussed, the need for changes in the food system always seem to come right to the center of the conversation. That's clearly the center of your world at Farmers Fridge. And you've talked about some of the ways that you're addressing sustainability issues as a company: recycling, accessibility, local sourcing. The question for you is, and you can expand on any of those, but sort of while you're doing your part, obviously within Farmers Fridge, what is your message to the food industry overall? What do you want to see other companies do? What changes might you like to see? And how can we galvanize people, the right people, around doing the right thing when it comes to reimagining our food system? That's a big question. You can have at it any part of it, Luke. Because if you could solve that, you'd probably be off somewhere picking up a Nobel Prize.
Different job probably, but I think I don't think it's somewhat repetitive, but I think the thing you can do is what everybody keeps saying is like tie sustainability to something that actually creates an economic benefit and that you have a way to win by delivering that product or service, and actually just like run that exercise as a company. So take a step back and say, like, what are we uniquely situated where we can leverage the scale that we have to create a proprietary supply chain, let's say, and something that actually supports sustainability and might have some particular cost advantage because of that sustainability component that's happening. If I were making like one single recommendation, I think probably creating a market for the negative externalities of these things is like the number one thing you could do. Obviously companies can't do that unilaterally, but actually creating that marketplace would create that leverage for companies or create new economic opportunities that they're not going to get rewarded for today, but we're still paying for as a society. So I think to me, that would be like the number one recommendation. So like, whether it's carbon or even just things like trash are actually very inexpensive to get rid of compared to the compost that we get rid of. So we have 2 programs at Farmers Fridge, and it always strikes me how inexpensive it is to throw away all of these things that are never going to go away in the environment. And it's very expensive to have somebody show up and turn our fresh fruits and vegetables into very valuable, usable nutrients for soil. So I just, things like that, I think you could create better incentives for people to innovate as a whole.
That's really interesting. So we need to flip the model. Okay. Really good, thoughtful. You did a good job with that giant question. Brenda, we're going to shift topics a little bit. We talked about the younger generation earlier, and sort of, obviously there's more concern and frankly, more action among today's younger generations when it comes to sustainability. That is clear. Companies are finding that they need to make a case for themselves as sustainability driven to even attract younger employees, and sort of fill their talent needs. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the changing mindset, as we look at younger consumers, younger generations, when they think about sustainability, and what can companies do to embrace that mindset and lean into it and attract talent?
That's a great question. So I have to first say that the fact that I work for a company like Accenture, that from the top down, they are really singing sustainability from the top of the pyramid here, is really amazing. And it makes my job not only easier, if sustainability is easy, because we know it's not, but just very enjoyable. So when you have a global CEO and a North America CEO and the president of our Midwest group, Lee Moore, say, we need to focus on this because we have to ensure that we're doing what's right for the environment. You have the E for the environment, the S for the social, and the G for the governance. We look at that in totality and we say, when we looked at the market pressures that I mentioned earlier, one of those market pressures are employee, right? So these younger generation, they have the option to work for companies that have sustainability at their heart and their goal, or as their goal. And we recognize that, right? Whether it's the ensuring that everything that they do, they recognize that sustainability is at the core. So as they innovate, right, we're a consulting company. We come up with new and great ideas and ways for our clients to do and run their business better. Everyone needs to have that innovation thought in their mind to say, how can what I'm doing, whether it's supply chain or ERP or whatever that may be, how can I make it a more sustainable, environmentally friendly process that we're doing? So hopefully that, answers the question, but that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, the chance to have an impact, even as a very young employee, is compelling. Paul, do you want to put our survey results up, and before we switch to a next question, maybe get some comments from our panel? There's always that long pause when we wonder if it's working. Do we have the results, Paul? There they are. Okay. Maybe not surprising that there's a split, because we all have our favorites here. But the winner, at least in this list among this group, with 36% of the vote, is clean water and sanitation.
I want to know how many times Rick voted, because
that's a win for you, Rick.
The one below that with recycling and plastics is, I'd like to take, say we had a role in that one too, right? So double hit.
You're taking the double. That's fair.
Luke, I voted for food, just so you know, Luke.
Me too. Me too.
All very important. We know that.
Fantastic. Okay, Ilse, I'm going to come back to you. I love how eclectic this panel is, because we are covering such a wide range of big, meaty topics. But Ilse, I want to ask you, we talked a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure there's people who are listening who are less familiar. Can you talk, and we know it's a huge mission for the United Nations, carrying out the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Can you just talk a little bit more, sort of ground everyone in that? How was that list generated? What does progress look like? What are we asking businesses to do? And what are we asking all of us to do? Just give us a little bit more of an education on where we are in terms
Mhm.
of tackling those goals.
Sure. Oh, great. No, I'm happy to. And I'm glad you just called them the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, or also the global goals, because they actually belong to everyone. So in terms of how they were created, it was an incredibly consultative process. And I'm very proud to have had my organization be part of bringing the voice of business into shaping the goals. I will tell you that almost every company we spoke with hated the idea of 17 goals. They said that's ridiculous. It's too many. You can't possibly get that all done. But we are talking about literally addressing every major problem on the planet. And so, so I think we're all living with 17 goals. So companies weighed in. They were then ratified and finalized by consensus. So yes, as you said, 193 companies signed on to them, including the United States. I saw some questions about this in the chat, so I'll address that as well, because awareness of them is fairly low in the United States. But the defining feature of these goals, as opposed to the Millennium Development Goals, which a few people on the call will know what I'm talking about, which were the goals that preceded the SDGs, is that they are universal. So every country in the world basically has signed on to them and has work to do to reach them, as opposed to just developing countries, which is what the MDGs were focused on. Secondly, they encompass not only social issues, but also environmental and economic, which is huge because all of these things are deeply intertwined. In terms of what progress looks like, each country is inching toward these goals. And it's a lot about, as I said, taking innovations to scale. What I will say is it's going to take bold transformation. We cannot make incremental change. And what I'll just add, what a lot of companies did in the beginning was just mapped what they're already doing to the SDGs, which is great. We appreciate that. But what we really need companies and others to do, and foundations and NGOs, and also individuals, is think about what can they do that's transformative, because to reach them it's going to take transformative change, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Everything from our personal habits all the way to, and the way we live our lives, all the way to, as we were talking about the financial sector, also interacting with companies differently. Just very briefly about the United States, the US has embraced the goals, or has agreed to the goals. The US is on the hook for the goals. The US is the only OECD country that has not yet reported on the goals. So in the last administration, the goals were not acknowledged at all. We anticipate that the Biden administration is embracing the goals. They will do what's called a voluntary national review next year. So if any companies are interested in participating in that, please do get in touch with us, because we very much want that to be an integrated report. And then just in closing, I'll say that the UN Foundation has partnered with Brookings Institute to launch a program called American Leadership on the SDGs, which is helping to support action locally to really demonstrate models of how the SDGs can transform and reach people's goals here in the United States. We're doing some work in assessing how business can play a part in that. And as somebody said in the questions, yeah, sadly, the knowledge of SDGs is not very broad in the United States, and we need to change that, because the public perception, and getting back to your youth point, the more consumers and employees demand it, that will also help justify corporate investment in the Sustainable Development Goals and in sustainability writ large and social impact.
Wow, that is an excellent overview, and I learned plenty from what you just said. Want to pick up on one thing you said when you said, it's great that companies are cognizant of, aligning with, hopefully committing to tackle the goals. But, rather than trying to sort of map against the 17, are you saying that like to see more companies sort of pick one thing to really drive major transformation on, or people sort of being like an inch deep and a mile wide, or companies not sort of landing on the one thing they can actually impact? Is that what was behind the comment?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thank you. The ideal thing is for companies, and one of you alluded to this, I think it was Luke, that the ideal thing is to understand where you can make a difference, what your core skill set is, what your reach is, what your network is, and to focus there. and not try to take on all 17, of course. I mean, most companies are, they're doing work around gender equality, they're doing work around, whatnot, but each company has a core competency and a role in the world in which they can make a difference, through which they can really make a difference. And let me just add one more thing that I think is really important to an American audience, which is that the third important feature of these goals is this concept of leaving no one behind, which you'll hear the UN leaders talk about all the time. And it's incredibly important, but I think every American, after what we went through last year, really understands it in terms of the social transformation that's been called for around inequality, be it racial, be it economic and gender inequality. But the country is at a pivot point and a pain point. And, I think an interesting question is, could the SDGs be a unifying factor? Would people be comforted to know that the government has signed on to these goals that would make everybody's life better, and that is premised on the notion of equality for everybody?
Thank you
A
for
little
saying that.
idealistic with the UN, sorry.
Oh, we'll take all the idealism you can serve up. That's wonderful. We're going to do a final poll. Give everybody a chance to weigh in. It's probably a good segue from some of the things we've just been talking about. Can you put the third poll up, Paul? I think that'll give us some good fodder for the last part of the conversation. So this one, we're asking, who in your view bears the most weight of advancing our planet's sustainability efforts? Another trick question. So do you think the biggest burden falls on government, corporations, the tech community, our best innovators and scientists, or educators? Okay, let our panelists respond as well. Ilse, you were talking about the big goals, the transformative goals. I just want to sort of flip it a little bit and ask everybody on the panel. Anyone can answer this one, but sort of shifting kind of to the other end of the spectrum. Sometimes the goal sounds so big, it feels paralyzing. And I think companies and individuals, it's kind of hard to imagine you can make a difference. And Rick, you touched on, I think, some of these good ideas in your remarks, but I'd love for, maybe we'll go to you first. Sort of assuming we're all on board, we want to do the right thing, we want to make change. Are there some simple changes, or maybe some often overlooked simple things that individuals can do or within their companies, or as just individuals in society, that can make a difference without introducing, lots of complexity and cost and implementation? I mean, what's some of the lower hanging fruit and maybe some simpler things people can do? And maybe even for those of us who want to be change agents within our organizations, what are some of the things that we can do to affect change without, introducing giant, complicated new implementations? Rick, you touched on this, so maybe we'll start with you and you can expand a little on some of the great things you guys are doing.
So I do think it's a very important concept, because to your point, you can get overwhelmed by the magnitude of change that's required and the size of some of these efforts. But, we like to think, never let what you can't do get in the way of what you can do. And you can do things every day. You can have a simple office recycling program. You can, in your company newsletter, you can provide education and contacts to organizations that support sustainability. You can bring some of those organizations into your company and organize volunteer events, which have other cultural benefits and collaboration benefits that are consistent with, for us, the culture of our organization. You can, and in many cases need to, build sustainability focus into how you interact with your suppliers and what you demand and expect of them and what they need to report out to you. So these are things that can take place every day. And I think as leaders, role modeling the behaviors around sustainability being really critical to us as individuals and to our companies just sets the right tone for others to respond and do the same. So those are all things that they aren't massive efforts, but when you add them all up, at companies with thousands of people, they begin to have a really big impact. So that I think you asked a question.
No, that's a great list. And I think even some of the things that you said in there, it's companies forget that they have influence, as you said, the suppliers, what you ask of your suppliers, and even the choices you make, who you choose to use as a supplier, you have influence and power that you can use to make a difference. I want to make sure that we use the last 20 minutes or so that we have together to cover. We've got a lot of good questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to go to the Q&A, and bear with me, not in any particular order. I'm just going to pull some of the questions from the Q&A from the audience, and I'll sort of let, some of them are directed to a few of you individually, but I'll let the panelists sort of comment on the ones that speak to you. So this, here's one from Stacy. Curious if you believe the regulatory environment will accelerate or hinder sustainability progress over the next 18 months. And Ilse, you touched a little bit about sort of change in administration, and you've commented a bit on that, but regulatory environment helping or hurting progress over the next 18 months? Who wants to comment or make a prediction?
I think that it will, if done correctly and it is stated specifically what the intention is. This goes back to the education and the purpose and understanding what the benefits are going to be. I think it will absolutely help, because it will drive companies to do things for carbon credits or tax breaks. I mean, I know I keep talking about the financial pieces of it, but I work for a corporation, right? So it will drive the correct behaviors if done appropriately.
Great answer. Here's a good one. And I'll throw this one maybe to Luke and Rick. Would you support sustainability if it was no longer profitable for your company? The purpose of the question is to understand how much, and I think this is maybe the deeper question, how much sustainability is not only a marketing initiative, but a deeply instilled value in company culture, and it, sort of a core to the business. Again, I think you both, as you've articulated, have an advantage here because it is instilled in the business, but maybe you can answer on behalf of other companies if you want to. Would you be supportive of sustainability even if it was not also good for business from a profitability standpoint? Luke, any point of view you want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, as a business, you earn the right to exist by having a profit. So it's sort of like I could change that in the favor of pure sustainability goals, and we would cease to exist and not really solve any problems. So the short answer is no. Like, I don't think you can do that. And that's sort of the message that I keep trying to say, is like, the more you can align those economic interests and your profit bottom line with the sustainability goals, the more realistic it is that we make real progress. And at the end of the day, the idea that it's just a corporate mantra is what happens when there's no way to find that profit goal, because companies are organizations that exist to make a profit, and there's a lot of ways you can make sustainability align with profitability. But when it doesn't work and when it becomes marketing is when those things aren't aligned. And it's just because, like, fundamentally companies exist to try to create an economic profit for their shareholders, and that's the nature of a corporation. So that's where I was getting at, like, incentives that can help change that equation in the rules of the game for all companies is a really important factor in driving that innovation, because then you have an incentive that is a new incentive you can go and innovate on. But yeah, and without that, you have to be profitable to exist and solve problems.
And you're saying, and sort of change the incentives so that the sustainable thing to do is the more profitable thing to do.
Correct. Yeah. So, like,
right.
Yeah, just that I think is actually where this should start. And trying to do that in a way that's as fair as possible, I think, is the challenging part, but certainly something that's what's worth spending the time on. Because if you give the companies are very good at figuring out ways to be profitable. So give them ways that, like, help them create incentives that are aligned to those sustainability goals.
Hey, Nancy, I think I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that many sustainability programs do take out costs and do increase the profitability. So You know, I know we're trying to educate everybody, because I think part of what we need to do as the United States, Ilse, is to do a better job educating what is sustainability, what is driving it, why is it important, right? Not just because we need to lower the temperature for, you know, the world and global warming, but it's also, there are things we can do, right, as companies that make us more efficient, that take the waste and reuse them. That those are profitable things to do.
Right. Yeah, and I think maybe to, like, for us as an example, you know, we have a huge incentive to use less energy because we spend a lot of money on energy. It's just one example.
Yeah,
We have a huge incentive to figure out how to be more productive with the products that we buy because it saves us money. So it's not, those are the things that really take root and drive change inside the business because they do both.
Right. The innovation of sensors that help you reduce your air conditioning or heating when no one's in the rooms. I mean, those are fantastic innovations that directly provide, you know, a better cost basis, or less cost basis, if you will, for companies, more profitability.
The other angle I might mention is just the people side. You know, when we think about our employees and our culture, to your point, Luke, you know, if you're investing everything in sustainability in a way that's unprofitable for the enterprise and it ceases to exist, then that doesn't do anybody any good. But you know, if we weren't focused on sustainability, even at least in small ways, some of our people wouldn't stay with us that we don't want to lose. Some of the people that we want to hire, you know, would research us, and if they concluded that we were not truly committed to sustainability, we wouldn't be able to hire them. So I do think, you know, when it's ingrained in your culture, you kind of start to see it is good for business. And so now within each individual business, how can you do that in a way where you have maximum impact on both the profitability of the business and sustainability? Well, that's where the creative problem solving comes in. But, you know, I think for us, if we weren't focused on it, it wouldn't be consistent with our culture, and we'd lose some great people.
Thank you. Well said. This is directed at Ilse and Brenda. This might get a little technical for some folks, but the request is, could you explain the impact on American businesses who are trying to follow ESG reporting guidelines set by the United Nations that also meet recent guidance by the SEC? Kind of a heavy technical question, but if you want to comment on that, by all means do.
Yeah, what was the first part? The impact, you said?
The impact on, can you explain the impact on American businesses who are trying to follow ESG reporting guidelines set up by the United Nations that also meet recent guidance by the SEC?
Yeah, so the impact is, you know, when we had talked as a group earlier, a couple of days ago, one of the things we talked about was, how do you work with your clients, Brenda, in this space, right? And what I'll say is that there's no cookie cutter approach, right? That each client has different things they're focused on. So from an ESG reporting perspective, they may be more heavily reporting on certain areas than others because that's their focus. The impact right now is that the financial community has stated, we are going to look at ESG scores, right? And if they are not good, we are not going to invest in those companies, because we now have scientific data, right? We have data that supports those companies that do better in their ESG scoring are more profitable and have less risk in their environment. So the impact to companies right now are, you need to figure out how you're going to report it, how you're going to make sure that, I think it's, and also you can keep me honest here, it's within the next few months, right, that there is going to be a standard report, because right now it's self-reported and there's a lot of apples to, you know, oranges comparison. In the very near future, that is going to be a standard report, and that is going to be the benchmark that companies are measured against. So that's going to be a significant impact.
Ilse, anything to add?
I can just echo that standardizing them is incredibly important, because companies are going crazy with the number of metrics that they're supposed to be reporting against. So, and I don't think the UN has any metrics that require companies to report against, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Paul, do we have the results of the third poll? Whose responsibility is it to carry the, okay. Oh, corporate, wow, okay. And this is interesting. It might have been answered differently, 10 years ago. But so more than half of us believe that corporations have the most power and opportunity to advance the planet's sustainability goals. That speaks volumes about people's view of government, and really interesting. Okay, I want to end us. We've got a few minutes left. It's an optimistic group. I want to end on a note of optimism. I'm going to ask each of the panelists, if there's something, can you offer something right now that is giving you reason to be optimistic? Something that gives you a feeling of encouragement or optimism about the future of the planet. That's a broad question. You can pick anything. Rick, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I am optimistic. I honestly am, and not to in any way minimize the enormity of the challenge, but I am optimistic. First of all, there's much better awareness about sustainability than at any point, I think, in our careers and lifetimes. I think the amount of data that we have is much better than it's ever been. I think, unfortunately, the consequences of a lack of sustainability are staring at us and are hard to ignore. And so that helps to spur action. We've got a younger generation that's very focused and demands companies to act differently. We have big companies that demand their suppliers act differently. And so I do think that there's a lot of optimism and reason for optimism. And I guess the last thing I'd say, to connect to a point that we've made, I think collectively as a group here today, is I think there's an increasing awareness that sustainability really is good for business. And when that's recognized and you invest behind it, and it pays off, and you can invest more and get bigger and grow, I mean, that's a really positive cycle. So for all those reasons, I don't underestimate the enormity of the challenge, but I believe that the momentum and trajectory of the focus and action on sustainability is very positive.
Wonderful. Luke, how about you? What's making you feel optimistic?
I mean, I'm generally an optimist. That's the kind of thing you have to have if you're starting a business. And I think,
good point.
Yeah. And for the same reason, I think, like, historically, human beings are very capable of adapting and coming up with creative solutions to solve problems. And so I think the problems are very solvable. And the fact that what Rick said is happening is where you're seeing this positive momentum, and the idea that these things don't have to be initiatives that you're forced to do, but they can be centers for profit and competitive advantage, and that consumers are aware of them and your employees are aware of them, and we're actually starting to get coordinated effort across countries and governments. I think all that's reason to be positive that we can make some progress. And sometimes it feels very slow, but a lot of progress actually can happen very fast once that flywheel gets spinning. So.
Great. Brenda?
I want to say ditto and ditto, first and foremost. And then, quite frankly, just the fact that the conversations that I'm having with so many of our clients and the focus they have on responsible business and sustainability, and the fact that there are real market pressures out there that, whether they're altruistic and at their heart, companies want to make those changes, or they're doing it because of those market pressures. It's like the perfect storm is happening for this space. And I am very optimistic that we're going to see some significant changes, and it warms my heart.
And Ilse, you want to close us out on that one? What are you feeling
Sure.
optimistic about?
First, ditto, 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 of course. And then just 4 quick things. Number one, I would say just the transparency that characterizes our lives these days is one of the things that's been driving the degree of awareness and action that we're seeing, and the accountability. Number 2, young people, as many of you have already referenced, and their role in helping to drive change. And with that, innovators, I will add, of course. The third is collaboration and collective action. that we saw, particularly during the pandemic. One of the silver linings of the pandemic is that the world has never come together collectively around something the way that they did. And that includes pharma companies that normally, fight each other, coming together to solve problems together. So we are seeing radical changes in collective action that itself gives me a lot of hope. And then the fourth is just the confluence. It doesn't matter if it's the SDGs or ESG or which, whatever it is that motivates you. These are all things that are moving in the same direction. The one thing I would caution is that we need to think of them as deadlines and not goals, because there just isn't time to do the same old. So that's a good motivator, I should say.
And a very good, powerful statement, I think, to leave everybody with. Fantastic discussion. This was really, really good. Great comments from everyone. Really appreciate the diversity of perspectives. I think there's 2 minutes left. Maybe Luke or Paul, other Luke, Tannen or Paul, one of you guys want to close us out?
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Other Luke here. And Nancy, thank you for doing a terrific job leading today's session. And Ilsa, Luke, Brenda, and Rick, you are an outstanding panel. I love the way you approach this topic. You illuminated both all the little things that individuals can do on a day-to-day basis that, when added up, is pretty transformational, but also all the big things that need to happen on a more structural level, like changing incentive structures that better connects good for business with good for the planet, and so much more. And as all of you know, our audience is a community of innovators. So I thought you made some great points about the role of innovation in creating new products, new services, new processes that have sustainability fundamentally built in to their DNA, as clearly, Luke, you and Rick have done with your companies. And finally, I want to thank our audience for tuning in and being part of Chicago Innovation's 20th anniversary year. Not over 100 like LK is, but we're getting there. Our 20th year of educating, connecting, and celebrating innovators. We have more events and programming planned this year than ever before. The next event for us all to reconvene is on June 21st. It's our annual Innovation for the Ages event. And in the meantime, you can all self-nominate your organizations for the 20th Annual Chicago Innovation Awards. The deadline is July 30th. It's coming up. And you can also buy tickets and get your companies involved in our Chicago Innovation Foundation in-gala on August 5th. So until then, stay well, take care of each other, take care of your communities, take care of the planet. It's the only one we have. I know Elon Musk is going to get us up to Mars at some point, but until then, it's planet Earth. So let's take care of it. And we hope to see all of you again real soon.